Hi guys, George Osborne, the former Tory chancellor, seems to be taking some thinly veiled satisfaction in the current implosion of the Conservative Party headed by Brexiteers. In this interview, he explained how following the Leave vote, it was quickly taken over by the populist wing, which eventually purged the moderates. Now, while he's correct to a certain extent, the idea that charlatans like Boris Johnson were their own undoing and they surrounded themselves with fools who provided no real threat to them, George can't wash his hands of the situation. Have a listen to this.
The overall situation is very demoralising for the Conservatives. And for what I hear, the individual members of the cabinet who are supposed to be on these big tours, travelling around the country, have basically all returned to their seats in large number. Frankly, no one is sure that their seat is safe, even if they've got on paper, huge majorities. And it's a bit like a First World War. They've sort of given up on the front trench. And they've fallen back, and they're now defending seats with 10 to 20,000 majority and pulling resources out of the smaller majorities. I mean, personally, I'd just say this whole kind of, concern about having a strong opposition would feel a little bit more credible if it wasn't coming from a sort of Brexiteer Tory majority who, were very happy to purge the Tories of people like Ken Clarke and Oliver Letwin and Rory Stewart, and called the judges the enemy of the people. And now here they are whining that they're about to be wiped out. I mean, there's nothing more sad than hearing populists who've turned out not to be very popular.
I almost thought you were going to say satisfying there. Nothing more satisfying. And you changed it at the last minute to sad, which I thought was a wise piece of political communication in the moment. But I thought satisfying was about to...
In politics...
the look on your face made you look a little bit satisfied by the comeuppance.
I would like there to be Conservatives in office. But you reap what you sow in politics.
Yes, you do. Now, we know Brexit eats its own children. We've seen so many examples of that. A project based on lies, sold by liars, has consumed its advocates, and they have nothing left to show, apart from abstract ideas like sovereignty, which they clearly don't understand. Now, while George Osborne can take a little bit of satisfaction in seeing, the Brexiteers that threw colleagues like him out of the party getting their comeuppance, he can't wash his hands of the situation, because we have to go back to when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer and he imposed austerity, because the cost of living crisis is deeply connected to austerity. Cuts in public services up to 40%, which resulted in numerous sectors of the economy struggling because of this idea that, there was a financial crisis, and instead of actually pumping money into the economy, what we're going to do is we're going to take money out of it. And of course, frontline services suffer because of that. This is part of the damage that people like Rishi Sunak and to a lesser extent Liz Truss and Boris Johnson were trying, in a sense, to fix, or maybe not to fix, but to try and paper over. They were trying to say, look, don't worry, the economy is going to start growing again. We're going to be able to fund public services. But austerity was the real kicker here, because it started the downfall. Brexit came along after that. And while George Osborne is happy to point the finger at Brexiteers, he's less enthusiastic about pointing the finger at himself. Because, as I've said before, public services need to be invested in. They need funding. And this is the challenge that's going to face the Labour Party. Forget about the Conservatives, forget about Rishi Sunak. They're not going to win, and even if they were to win, they're not going to fund public services to the extent that's necessary. They're not going to undo the damage that people like George Osborne inflicted upon the UK. Labour are going to face a massive challenge. I've compared it, he made an analogy with the First World War. I'm comparing it to Second World War, the rebuilding after the Second World War. A completely leveled society, in a sense. Razed to the ground. It all has to be rebuilt. Literally, in some cases, when it comes to schools that are falling down because of wreck, or courts that have been on hiatus for a period of time. You have public services on their knees. You have striking workers. And even as the Labour government a new government comes in, they're going to have to deal with Tata, British Steel. So There are a whole range of problems, political problems, economic problems that have to be dealt with. The public are expecting something to be done. And while it's understandable that people like George Osborne can point the finger at Brexiteers, he also has to point it at himself, because the rot began under him and his Prime Minister. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.